Okay, we should be live.
All right. Thank you, Celeste. Welcome everyone to What's the Tea? This is our weekly Tuesday Facebook show where we talk about domestic violence related topics and about our agency at South Suburban Family Shelter. My name is Zach Kapos. I'm a community educator here, and we have two awesome guests here today. We'll start with our new guest, Liz Mackey. Thank you for being here, Liz.
Thank you for having me.
And Kerry Hill, our Community Education Program Manager. Thanks again for being here, Kerry.
Hello, thanks, Zach.
So today we're going to talk about topics about domestic violence related to how this looks maybe a little bit different in rural communities. So first, I'd like to introduce our guest, Liz Mackey. She is the Domestic Violence Program Coordinator at Dove Inc. So Liz, can you tell us what it is that you do at Dove and just a little bit about Dove?
Well, what I do at Dove here, I am the county coordinator for the domestic violence program. This county I cover on my own. It's 436 square miles of central Illinois that I provide DV education outreach services. Dove has been around for over 50 years now, and we've expanded. So we cover all 5 surrounding counties to Macon County. We also have in the town, we have Dove Financial Services, which is for everyone, not just DV victims, for financial assistance as far as utilities and things like that.
Awesome. And as far as domestic violence services, which of those do you provide? And if I understand right, you're running the show over there.
I provide all of the domestic violence services. I start to finish am involved in DV services that somebody's coming to get. I start from the order of protection at the courthouse to the end. Maybe there's a 2-year order of protection, transitional housing. I cover to that point. So, and a lot of what I do is also safety planning and DV counseling, one-on-one counseling, where people can learn and learn about healthy relationships and things such as that. COVID kind of put a shutdown to the DV education and outreach portion of the program, but it hopefully will come around soon.
Yeah, I mean, we're very fond of it, that being our role at South Suburban Family Shelter, of course. So that's a lot of services, and we had a little bit of a conversation in the pre-T, so we know some of the things we're going to talk about. But before we get there, could you tell us how you got involved in domestic violence work in general?
In general, I got involved in direct domestic violence services in college. I was getting my degree in women's studies, and part of it was internships and working at social services places in the community. And it was in San Rafael, California at Marine Abuse Women's Services. I was a hotline advocate, which I required the 40-hour, I got the 40-hour training. I received training beyond the 40 hours, and I did the hotline, and I realized how important it is to be that person in that moment for some people. And that's what hooked me. And it's been from there, it's progressed.
And you're still that person in your new role. You just, if I remember from our pre-conversation, but now you're doing that plus other things, right?
I'm doing that plus a lot of other things. There's a lot more money to do it with too, because in California was sometimes it was interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a big change of scenery. And that kind of brings me to the topic of leadership in general. Now that you're leading there and you have so much responsibility. So I would like to maybe transition with Kerry and kind of talk about how we all got together for this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. So Liz and I met through the Illinois Coalition Against Domestic Violence Leadership Academy. We were in the same cohort, was that 2019 to 2020, right? So we I remember we started in person in Springfield sessions with our full cohort, and then the pandemic got underway, and then we shifted to virtual. And I know that for me was a big part of our cohort experience being really strong throughout, is that if we had started virtually, we all kind of had this thought, like, would we really have made the connections we did? And so I guess when I talk about Leadership Academy with you, I'm just wondering, what were the specific takeaways that you find yourself revisiting, or that have like become something that really stuck with you from that experience?
What stuck with me was the empowerment that we all had
Yeah.
together. And I mean, we came from all over the state. We spent 2 days together. We ate together. People played together. You know, it was a great time. But we came from all over, and we've all drawn back on these people. I mean, how many times has something come up where I say, oh, I need Kerry for this? I think we're stronger at our organizations for just being able to have these people throughout the state with, I don't know this, but I know who does. And I don't think we experienced Leadership Academy. We were there at the beginning. And I think Illinois, I think we all got sent home like the day leadership was supposed to happen.
I'm pretty sure that's right.
It was like March 16th. We were getting ready to go to Leadership Academy, and then it was, psych, you're not going.
Yeah, stay home.
We were kind of all sitting around going, and they tried the virtual. So we were the guinea pigs for the virtual model of Leadership Academy. And
Yeah.
because we had that connection before, we all survived it okay. But being in person and together was amazing. Every single person that we were at Leadership Academy with, you know, we're all still tight.
Yeah, agreed. When we were talking in the pre-T, as Zach referred to it, we were both talking about, you know, there's plenty to take away from Leadership Academy, but the connections with everybody in that cohort have proven to be really the most valuable thing. And what I keep revisiting, obviously, we're having you here on What's the Tea with us. So I have found myself going back to that community so many times to say, hey, I need a hand with something, or hey, who knows about this aspect of domestic violence, or what does it look like how you do your work, so we can learn from that, whatever. Everybody's continued to just be so open to share their expertise, their experience, their knowledge. And I just think that honestly has risen to the top. The other thing that I find myself using, of course, from Leadership Academy is the content. And I wonder with how you do your work, this sort of like stem to stern approach to providing services where you're the person, you're that person, as you said. Was there any of the content from Leadership Academy that you're like, I pull on this all the time, whether that's the empathetic communication content, for example?
That the whole communicating, we did 2 days of communicating, finding out learning styles, other people's learning styles. And even though I remember at the time we were going, at first it started, we were going, what is this? Yeah, we all work together just fine. You know, we do our jobs. But the more we got into it, I mean, I believe you and I even connected over nonverbal cues with people.
Oh, totally.
There was a lot things like that I gained so much out of. And as far as learning styles, my own learning style, and trying not to project my learning style on someone else, that was the most valuable sessions we had.
I agree with you. I pull on that one all the time. I've shared the content from that with my colleagues at SSFS. And you're right. I remember you and I being like, well, we're both giant introverts. We need that recharge time. Like at the end of a day when we were in person at the Leadership Academy, I remember folks were organizing, like, let's have reservations at the barbecue place and do all this stuff. And I was like, I would love to be with people, but I need to be quiet and alone. And, you know, it was almost like if we could have an extra day on the end of Leadership Academy, then I could have gone out to dinner with everybody, because I would have had the recharge time. But so I remember, because of that, you and I both being like, yeah, being able to become better at reading people's unspoken signals is so helpful, you know, because at least for me, I wonder if this resonates with you. I think I send a lot of nonverbals, being an introvert, that when people respond to accurately, I'm so grateful that they picked up on what I was quietly putting out there.
You know, I always emphasize, people want to be seen. People recognize. And I always remember that, just that full on giving that other person their respect. You know, it doesn't have to be on topic, you know, notice something, say hi, remember somebody's name. Those are such important little things that people forget that, oh yeah, you have to sharpen up on your social skills sometimes and learn with other people. And
Yeah.
I thought it was great for a bunch of professionals just to be in one room going, we don't know too much about communicating right now.
Exactly. We thought we were solid here.
Yeah, we thought we had this.
Apparently not so much. So one of the things I remember you talking about in Leadership Academy is being like a one-person shop. And so, for example, at our agency, if you're not great with somebody's communication style, for example, you oftentimes have somebody else in your agency, in your office, right next door, that you could be like, I am not connecting with this person. I need a leg up. I need a hand. Can you help? And you don't have that luxury. So can you tell us a little bit about some of what you find challenging and what you find great, honestly, about being a one-person shop?
The great thing about being a one-person shop is I don't have conflicting personalities trying to take the lead in different situations.
Sure.
You know, there's no, I did this, you did that. It's, I know my job and I'm going to do it right. And I have that confidence in myself.
Yeah.
The hard in being the only person is no matter what's going on in my day, whatever person, client I just worked with, the next one is going to be 1,000% different.
Yeah.
Of mine. It's going to be, you know, there could be crying, there could be yelling, they could be angry, or they could be, you know, calm. It's that quick adapt. You've got to be quick to adapt to what's in front of you. And when you do that, you also need to just remember trauma informed. Our trauma informed brain kicks in with stepping into new situations and reading nonverbal cues, you know, because somebody's going to be reacting and flipping out, you know, how they're going to be. Remember, let them be them. That's their reaction, you know, take it gently, you know, listen.
Yeah.
That's a challenge, is going from one crisis to the next, because no two crises are ever the same.
Sure. And as we were talking, I'm thinking you also don't have anybody to spell you, in a sense. Like, what I mean by spell you is like, let me tag out for a minute. You handle this next crisis because I'm at my limit. Whereas in our agency, of course, we have a staff of 60, and we are able to be like, I need you to spell me for a minute so I can get my life together. If we've been so impacted that we don't think we would be the best person for this next survivor in this next crisis. And I think it's really striking that you don't have that option. And I wonder, when you may feel at your limit, do you have any coping mechanisms that allow you to push through?
I absolutely have zero problem taking a break and excuse me, I have something to do, because I know myself and I can't sit for hours, crises after crises, without having a break. Or if somebody's, or even in the order of protection process, when they're writing out a narrative, you know, and they're gathering their thoughts, I like them, you know, do that quietly. And that's a time for me to step back and breathe and regroup, you know, figure out the next step, get my ducks all in a row so I can serve this person, you know, the fullest.
Yeah.
So I find breaks during my days that, you know, kind of bring me back to me. But I always check in with myself, because you hear so much stuff, and you have to step and kind of regroup.
Yeah, to me, that really sounds like you're describing trauma informed boundary setting. You know, that you're not saying to this person, I can't deal with you right now because I need a minute. You're saying, okay, I got you set up, write your narrative. I just got something I got to deal with over here, or attend to. I'll be right back. And, you know, in that way, you aren't re-traumatizing this person, but you are also being trauma informed to yourself and recognizing, I need to breathe. I need to regulate myself so that I can serve this person.
If I'm a mess, nobody's getting it. It's no good if I'm I don't have the luxury of falling apart sometimes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's why I always put, you know, that stuff at the forefront of what I do as far as self-regulation and keeping myself calm and collected.
Yeah, our agency is later this month going to start a webinar series based on Dr. Bruce Perry's coronavirus webinar series. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but he talks exactly about what you're saying, that an unregulated or a dysregulated person cannot regulate another dysregulated person. So it's exactly what you're describing. If you're not regulated, then this other person has no hope of getting the services they need from you. And you're both just going to continue to be in chaos and crisis.
They feed off that. If I react to something they're reacting to, it just gets, feed off my reaction.
Sure.
I'm not going to, have a negative reaction or, get too worked up, because then they think, oh my God, what have I done?
Sure.
TV advocate worked up. Oh my goodness.
How terrible must my situation
Yes,
or what
how
I'm
terrible
bringing
is-
here be? Yeah.
Correct.
Which again, I want to state, Zach, I know we want to move to some of the more specifics about what serving folks in rural communities and being part of those communities looks like. But before we do, we're talking a lot about trauma-informed care. And I don't know that we've talked much about that on previous T episodes. So I thought maybe we would take a minute and just kind of define it a little for what we're talking about. If you were to describe trauma-informed care or trauma-informed services or approach, what comes to mind for you, Liz?
Trauma informed, I always go into the fact that this person has so many intersections of different crises going on. And trauma informed, I can't in any way expect them to act a certain way. Help me, Kerry. I'm kind of
Well, I think what you're really getting at is that being trauma informed recognizes how trauma impacts people and their behavior and their brains, right? So if we have an expectation that this person should do or say or behave in a certain way, then we're fooling ourselves, because understanding trauma impact tells us that there is no norm. It's subjective to how this person processes the trauma they've experienced. And so they may be quiet where we expect them to be talkative. They may be talkative where we expect them to be silent. They may not be able to make eye contact. Their behaviors will be driven by how their trauma impacts them. And so that's really what I hear you describing, is that you understand that it's going to be very subjective.
Yes.
And the other thing you said that stands out for me is the intersection of various kinds of trauma. So that you don't know this person's whole life. They've come to you because they have an experience with domestic violence. They may not be telling you that their mental health is suffering because of the pandemic. They may not be telling you that they're going through an illness or that a family member has just passed away. And there may be other traumas that are layering into how they process their DV. So that's the other thing you were expressing that really stood out to me.
It's the holistic approach with people. You have to, take into account everything they have going on, and how they react is their reaction, not yours. How I react is my reaction, it's theirs. Let them process it their ways that they know how and have, taught themselves to cope.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Zach, is there anything you would add on the idea of what trauma-informed approach
Zach.
really means? Yeah, here it is.
I think you're both right on point with that. For me, it's always pretty much what you all are getting at. It's kind of being ahead of the game a little bit. And for me, it was always easier to talk about being trauma informed beforehand, and then instead of trying to regroup in the moment. So just understanding the responses, the trauma responses, and expecting them. And I believe that's what you were saying as well, Kerry, that you're not going to get the response that you might expect from someone else, and just being ahead of that and understanding and seeing the whole person and what they have been through.
Yeah, I think another aspect we haven't touched on of trauma-informed care is the idea that we actively seek to avoid re-traumatization. So what you were saying, Liz, about I'm going to make sure I'm regulated because I don't want to come to this person and have a huge reaction to what they're saying, because not only will that make them, will you guys get nowhere because you're both so high, what's the word I want, sort of like
Or just high emotions.
high emotion, thank you. But it also has a re-traumatizing aspect. The thing we talked about, now that person's going to be like, oh my God, now how terrible must my situation be? Now we've just added that re-trauma to them because we made them feel like their story or their experience was so awful that we can't even handle it. And we're trained to handle it,
Yes.
so that active choice in how we respond to be calm, to be compassionate, to be empathetic has that trauma informed aspect also of like, I don't want to make your situation and your trauma impact worse by how I respond to it. Excuse me. Well, and the other thing I thought of, and I wonder if you experience this as well, is that trauma impacts folks in ways that I think we don't necessarily just understand naturally unless we've learned it, which is they may not be able to comprehend or retain information, for example. So when you talk about an order of protection and that process, unless you're somebody who does orders of protection day in and day out, like for example, our court advocates could rattle off the ins and outs of the order of protection process and all its variants, like the most pro expert you'd ever want to see. But for me to do so, or Zach to do so, we would be like speaking a language we'd never knew existed. And that is often the case for victims and survivors that we work with. And so then recognizing how trauma layers into that, we're now asking them to deal with a legal document and a legal process and a court process and all of this that may be very foreign to them. It's hard
right there. And just right there, you knocked on one of the biggest barriers that I face in working with individuals, because there are so many unique barriers that come with working in a small community and working in a community that everybody knows everyone. The courthouse itself is a power structure. The building power, it's designed as a power structure. It's a building of law. And that it's scary to people because people are walking into a courthouse, a building of law, and things going through their head as, am I dressed right? Because there's a dress code, sign at the door. Where do I go? Who do I ask to go? Oh no, that's the deputy that arrested me, 6 years ago that's working security. So many levels, that are part of that barrier that I have to recognize, and deal with, and help these people overcome these barriers.
That's so interesting. Something I hadn't thought about is when I'm picturing like communities. I've lived in Illinois my whole life, and I'm picturing communities between here and my brother lives downstate. And anytime you get off the highway in farmland, there's that courthouse that's the center of that place. And you're right, just physically imposing in that way. And it's interesting how you describe maybe coming into court and saying, oh, gosh, that's the deputy that arrested me 6 years ago, that there would be no anonymity. There would be no like, let me just get through this process. Because you're going to see people that you've interacted with in a way in that power structure. And I think that's really interesting as well, that you call out the power element, because we know that people impacted by DV are having their power taken and stripped from them. And so then to feel another power element like that as they try to seek protection, I would imagine can be very confusing and intimidating.
It's very intimidating and scary for people.
Yeah.
Just one of the biggest barriers in working in a rural community is the confidentiality aspect of it, because I never know who's going to walk in my door. But that person, whoever they just were, I probably will see them at the store next week. Our children might go to the same store or the same school. I will see them, or my mom went to school with her mom, or, there's always going to be that connection that has to be emphasized in my job, is that what you and I do stays between you and I, as child abuse and suicide threats that I have to call in. Everything stays between you and I. If I see you at the grocery store, I'm not going to be like, hey, Kerry, how you doing?
Right.
I embarrass you like that. And that's also because people know what I do. And people would, you would be worried about, oh my God, who saw me talking to Liz, the Dove advocate? Are they going to think, that something's
But
up?
that's why. Yeah. Okay.
So that's one of the aspects of working in a small community is we all know everybody,
Yeah, for sure.
maintaining that level of respect and confidentiality.
For sure. That really makes me think, Zach, of we often talk about people having a perceived stigma about DV, and the long held sort of myth, this is a private family matter as opposed to a public health issue, a criminal law issue, and all the other kinds of issues it is. And I wondered, did you have some follow-ups about that specific dynamic of living in a place where everybody knows everybody?
Yeah, because I'm thinking in terms of barriers and access to services, where, and really I guess I'm mostly curious as to the social cohesion part of it. I know you mentioned the courthouse, Liz. Do you find when people come and seek services to you that maybe not even the power structures like police and the judges, but do you find that the family ties and the schools um, and maybe moving can be a difficult thing when you're in a small town like that? Do you find that the social aspect is really heavily reported on when people see you?
The social aspect is probably the biggest barrier with my job. And the social barrier, even in the fact is that if I'm in trouble, I'm not going to call the police because I know the deputy is going to show up at my house. We're all from the same circle. And I don't think I'm answering your question though.
That was exactly it.
That was just it. And it's such a barrier for seeking services. My office is actually, I'm strategically, like every small Midwest town, we have the courthouse square. It's centrally located in the middle of town. My office is strategically directly across the street from the front doors of the courthouse. So I too, I'm in Courthouse Square, and I'm in a building next to a doctor's office. So it's not like you're walking into my building and people say, oh, look, Kerry's walking into the DV offices. There's another thing going on. So it's not such a big thing for people to be scared to walk into.
Got it.
There's that, and just everybody knowing, and the schools have been great. The schools are very good about keeping things under wraps, things going on with families. And I have great respect for the administration of this, these schools, and, doing their part in keeping things confidential when I tell them things, or if they tell me things, confidentiality is the most important.
I think that's maybe one of the differences because there's such more population density here that from what we hear, I believe in terms of seeking services, it's more so there's they have children with the other person, or that there's financial reasons, or mixed feelings about they love the person still, and things along those lines, versus the structure and the community really holding someone back. So I see that as a big difference. Would you say transportation or distance from a service is a barrier as well?
Yeah, my county is 436 square miles, I believe. And I am the DV advocate for Piatt County. And transportation is always an issue if you don't live in this direct city of Monticello. I live in Monticello, and this is the biggest city in the county. But if you live on the outskirts in one of the smaller communities, transportation is always an issue. Getting in and getting out. We actually have it set up with the local transportation company that we do offer free rides to and from the courthouse if needed. Even that in itself sometimes is scary for people who've never taken public transportation, have no idea who's coming. But we do have that transportation available, if needed, because that is a barrier that we had to tackle because people could not get to the courthouse.
And so with 436 square miles, about how long can it be for someone to get to the courthouse or to you?
The farthest place is about a 45-minute drive.
Wow.
That's pretty lengthy, I think.
And it's also, only between 8:30 and 4:30, Monday through Friday. We don't have anything beyond that, but thank goodness I have a hotline. We have a 24-hour hotline that's always answered county. So there is somebody, if you need to call and talk to somebody, there's somebody available on our hotline. But
yeah. I'm going to jump in with a question, if that's okay, Zach. Would you say in your area and in your community, folks work is a pretty standard sort of a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 kind of a thing? Or yeah, so that sounds like also such a huge factor then in access to services. If you're 45 minutes away and you got to access services during your workday.
And you have to count for an hour lunch. Every place between 12 and 1 is lunchtime here.
Is that right?
Yes. So there will be lunch breaks in court. There will be things closed for an hour during lunch.
Which again, Zach, how different is that from how we function? In our, Zach and I, in our program is in non-pandemic times situated in our public building where people can, like where our street address is noted. And there's about 10 to 12 of us in any given day in there. And, we're all eating at different times of day for lunch. We never are closed down at any point during the day. Basically we're always accessible during that work day. Somebody can always be responsive. But you're right. If I leave my workplace at 10 a.m. and for whatever reason it takes me more than that 45 minutes, I might be landing at your place right as you're shutting the door.
Or landing at somebody's place while they're shutting the door, and we're going to have to say, oh, can you come back at 1:30? No, I 45 minutes to get here. Yeah,
exactly.
That's where the hotline always has come in to kind of make up for any lag in not being able to get somewhere or a hold of anybody.
Got it.
Well, do we want to check in with Celeste and see if we have any questions from Facebook?
Yeah, let's see.
I checked a couple seconds ago, so let me recheck. No questions so far.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to talk about that we talked in our pre-T, and for folks that might just be joining us, when we say pre-T, the three of us were having a chat in our Zoom meeting before we made it live. And one of the things we got talking about, Liz, is how do you make your space welcoming for folks who may be stressed by coming up to you for help, or maybe uncertain or fearful? What are some of the ways you make your physical space someplace where they can feel safe or not judged, or that they can actually use what you're offering them for support?
Well, even I look at it, even the way I set up my desk. I have my office set up. I have my desk over against a wall. So I kind of work to the side of the door because I don't want anybody to walk in directly facing somebody sitting at a desk, because I think that's intimidating, and it's kind of welcome to my own little power structure in my office. This is my desk, I'm behind it, you will listen to me. No.
Got it.
And I make that over there. And I always make sure, you have a table and I sit with somebody at the table. I never sit at my desk and talk. You just make yourself on the same level.
Sure.
And just make
Makes a lot of sense.
My lighting, I have lamps, I have the lighting nice. It's, I don't want this place to be scary, and I don't want it to feel kind of institutionally.
It makes a lot of sense. And it really puts me in mind of our earlier discussion about being trauma informed. If I've experienced trauma and I need some assistance, feeling a space that's welcoming and warm and not intimidating will go a long way to me being able to take the help and support that's offered. I had a follow-up question, and it's totally gone from my mind. Of course. Zach, anything from you?
One thing I'm happy about is a good and bad thing. I'm really happy to have Liz here because we do touch on this in our 40-hour training. And it's very good that the information that we've had is reflective of what you're saying, Liz. So I'm glad that the flow of communication with our information tends to be true. But of course, unfortunately, that means that those barriers to access are also true that we're talking
Very
about.
real.
But it is good to hear some of the ways that you've worked around that. So I see that as a positive.
Yeah, I echo that, Zach. When we're teaching this aspect of the 40-hour training, we're talking about, I think the way that the state sort of puts this topic out there is survivors with unique challenges is the heading. And it's all sorts of folks that might be under that heading. To my way of thinking, all survivors have unique challenges because all survivors are unique. But one of the ones they call out in particular are people living in rural communities. And for Zach teaching that subject in our 40-hour, it's the difference between teaching and training on something that he's learned from books, reading, trainings, etc., versus teaching from a place of personal experience. And so I agree with you, Zach. I'm glad that our conversation with Liz is validating the way you approach this topic.
Absolutely. And
Do you have any questions for me, like about that and the whole rural things act that you're working on?
so a lot of it does just revolve around this idea of the social cohesion in that small knit community, because that, to me, that is the biggest difference. And I guess I'm thinking after someone comes and speaks with you, Liz, how do they come to terms with making this decision for their safety, but also maybe having to be more honest with people about what's happening in their lives and kind of telling them the truth about that and moving forward?
Well, how they move forward and tell people about their situation is they do that their way. One thing that is very important in my community and working with these individuals is safety planning, because people think domestic violence and they're wondering, well, why can't we of course, everybody, the first question is, why didn't you leave? Why didn't they leave? All right. Well, a lot of my situations that I encounter, the goal isn't leaving. The goal is immediate safety. The goal is, how can we make you safe? No matter what that looks like. Does it look like you going for a walk at a certain time of day? Does it look like you going to visit your friend at a certain time of day? Or do you need to go, stay with another friend because there's something coming up? That's one of the interesting things that you deal with that people don't understand is a lot of people aren't leaving these relationships, but we're going to help them be safe now so that when they are ready to leave, they have some sort of idea of who to talk to, what they can do. But safety planning is always the most important thing to do with my clients and their, situations. But a plus side of living in a small community is a lot of people have family around. There's and a small community like mine, one of the biggest problems we have is we have a complete lack of transitional housing. I don't have the transitional housing, and I know that that's a problem a lot of places, but in my county, transitional housing it's almost non-existent. We have some public housing, facilities, but in my county, there's different school districts, and a lot of people don't want to move their kid from one school to another. I don't have safe transitional housing to offer a lot of the time. And as far as shelter, my organization we have an emergency shelter, and it's in Macon County. People don't want to leave my county to go to emergency shelter. So I have, safe places for them to go within the county. And I even of the county, because there are places I know in Champaign County that house somebody who has their dogs or their cats, or safe places to go with, your animals that aren't here.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, Liz. Something that was occurring to me as you were talking about people's connection to where they're at and what their options are, maybe with family and that sort of thing, was we tend to think about. I'll get there. I sometimes, go roundabout about my questions.
That's
we
why we
tend to
love you.
think of we tend to think of victims and survivors of domestic violence as being straight white women.
No.
And what about in your community about folks who don't fit that stereotype? People in the LGBTQ rainbow, people who are men, how might being in a rural community make it even more challenging for folks with those kind of identities?
And I am going to speak first on the men that I work with, because living in this community, gender roles are not only ingrained in your head from childhood, they're passed down. Gender roles are very much alive and thriving in this community. And I think that's something that when a male comes to me who's in a dangerous situation, that's one of the things you always talk about is you always, say, you're not the first guy I've seen this week. You're not the first person I've worked with about this, no matter, you just let them know that they are not the only ones, because I would say 40% of my clientele are men.
Okay.
To 40% are men that I work with who are in abusive situations.
Yeah.
And they have such a hard time getting through their head that they're victims of domestic violence, when that's such, in our community, such a, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
I remember specifically, my building's under construction, and there were some people in here, come viewing the building, and they were males, and they were talking about, oh, that's Dove. Well, and then somebody said, well, what's Dove? And they said, well, that's where your girlfriend, from Tahiti finds out about your wife or something. And I'm just, no, are we still?
That's not.
Yeah, that's the gender roles are so rigid, visible.
Gotcha.
Most encouraged.
Got it.
That is a very, interesting dynamic that men tend to grapple with.
Yeah.
When I work with them.
Understood. That
So
sounds
guys,
really
I don't mean
challenging.
to, I'm sorry. I don't mean to
Please
interfere,
go.
but we do have some questions in the chat. If you all have a minute for those.
Heck yeah.
So the first question says, with such tight-knit communities, do you see possibilities for how community members can work together to create more accountability for those that are harming their partner?
Creating accountability is hard because of the close-knit community. I believe that they are very good. They want to be aware of the situation. They want to be involved, and they want to help. Accountability is almost an issue that, a lot of DV in my county isn't charged as far as criminal charges, arrests made. So much of what I do doesn't involve the criminal side, because the criminal side, you have people abusing over and over again, and they get off with probation. Accountability is a tough nut to crack in a small knit community. We know, there's also, but there's a few that people do know, oh, I know so-and-so when they did this and so, but there's not a lot of accountability as far as criminally being charged for domestic violence, but that's not unique to rural, that's domestic violence.
Sure.
It doesn't get charged nearly as much as it should.
Do you have, I haven't heard you mention it, but for example, our agency offers services to victims and survivors, but we also provide services to adults who use violence with their adult intimate partners in an intervention program. Do you have any sort of intervention services for people who are harming partners?
Our organization does not work with the abusers, or we do not have any partner abuse, intervention program.
Yeah.
At the moment, I know there's one in Champaign in the next county over that I know the court sends people to if necessary, But as far as my organization, no, I don't do partner abuse intervention programs.
Got it. So am I hearing right that the main mode of accountability would be through the system via being charged and or being sent to an intervention program in the next county? That's sort of the main, and it's at a system level, not necessarily like a community grassroots, like, hey, let's make our community safer.
Community
approach.
grassroots, our community is very good. They
Okay.
want healthy relationship trainings in school. They want, these type of, come out and speak. They want DV education. They want to know, and that's, my community is great. Monticello and this county is a great community. The accountability for abusers,
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
The next question kind of piggybacks off of what you are discussing now. So you mentioned that some people may not want to involve the police because they know them personally.
Mhm.
So how do folks get their needs met outside of using this legal system?
as using the police,
Right.
say the question again.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't want to call the police because they know them personally. So
Mhm.
what other ways do you have for them to get their needs met other
Well,
than using the legal system?
Without using, you can come to me. You don't necessarily have to go through the police to get to me. I would rather have not a lot to do with the police a lot of the times when working with victims, but you can come directly to me and get DV service. All of my services free. I have free financial services, free counseling. You can come directly to me and receive services, and we can completely do everything and get somebody in a place where they're feeling safe without police involvement.
Awesome. Anything else from Facebook, Celeste?
I am trying to refresh the page just to make sure I'm not missing anything, but no, nothing else here.
All right.
Yeah, just that was a great description of trauma-informed care.
Oh,
Thank you.
It was hard to add something to it. I did my best. It
we
wasn't-
crowdsourced that thing.
All right. So coming up to, if you guys can believe it, almost an hour here. So Liz, was there anything else that you wanted to share?
We hit the trauma informed, and because I wanted to make sure that the trauma informed always stays in the front when you're working with victims, that and everyone is different. I think that's one of the most important things.
Yeah.
Remaining trauma informed, keeping yourself regulated, because you are a person of strength. You are supposed to be a person who has it together. Be that. You need to be that person for these people. I don't have a backup. Just trauma informed first and foremost.
Absolutely. And Kerry,
great.
anything from you?
No, I think that's a great one to close on, honestly, as our main takeaway and our closer. So I don't have any parting words other than just gratitude. Thank you so much, Liz. You're
Well, thank
super
you.
fantastic.
That flew by.
It really did. I just can't tell you how much we appreciate the insight into an experience that we just don't have, because our community is such a different place than your community. So even though we share the same issues of people being harmed in their relationships and the same goals of creating safety and promoting healthy relationships, the way we are able to do that looks in so many ways very different. And so it's just been super valuable for you to share this experience.
And I want to go back to people and their nonverbal cues, and really seeing people and listening to people.
Yeah.
One of a big thing that we can do for others is to see others and not take away any of their power. Our job, give them their power back, make them feel empowered.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
Always remember, people just want to be seen, respected.
Super important. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Liz. It's been a great episode, and I've learned a lot. Thank you, Kerry. And we'll
Thank you,
see
Zach.
everyone next week, next Tuesday at 2 p.m., same time and place. We'll have different tea and a new conversation.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.